Hi, Stu, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the new definitions of what constitutes economic recession. In fact, there's two things going on here: new ways of measuring what a recession is, and new ways of defining it and explaining it, I suppose. But per capita recession is the new buzz, and I'll simplify this a little bit. What it means is each individual becomes poorer, even though the economy of the nation is growing. So what mass migration is doing, and the mass migration to Australia was recently ramped up to 100,000 a month. Now, whether that continues for the rest of the year is another matter, but it just goes to show how aggressive these globalist-controlled Western governments are in ramping up and ginning up mass migration. It doesn't matter whether it's Britain or the United States or Australia; it's happening on an insane scale. And many of these people, of course, are simply illiterate peasants from the third world. They can contribute nothing to the economy. So let's have a look at two things here. Is mass migration just in isolation causing economic growth? Well, there's a few things we need to dissect. That everyone's getting poorer is without question. This is because the cost of living is rising at a rate much faster than wages. Now, none of this increase in the cost of living is organic or natural. None of it is market driven. Not one little tiny bit of it is market driven, unless you look at government, and globalist intervention in the market to rig it in one direction or another. So, for example, if there was a law saying no one's allowed to put their houses out for rent, and rent suddenly quadruple overnight, then you say, well, look, it's the market forces. There's just not enough places to rent. The market. But no, the government's intervened to rig the market. So we need to sort of be cognizant of that. Now, all the increases in cost of living have come from the government artificially interfering in the energy market to make energy far more expensive than it needs to be. And the government interfering in the rental and housing and residential property market generally. Again, making it far more expensive than it needs to be. And again, the government interfering in manufacturing and distribution and so on, and causing food prices or the essential goods, food, and this is causing the purchasing power of the paycheck to plummet. So rents are many times higher than they were 5 years ago, as is energy and foods. So food's increasing at a price 25 to 30% faster than wages. Rents are increasing almost double the rate of wages, and energy similarly increasing at 2 to 3 times, and indeed 4 times if you look at the most recent price rises, 4 times faster than the price of 4 times faster than wages. So you can see where the pressure's coming from. Now, what causes this? On one side, there are people who say, well, look at the mass migration. It's creating so much competition for properties and rents. That's why but not that would assume that all the migrants coming to Australia, the mass migrants, all had enough money to go and buy a house, and were also acquiring property at the rate of one house per person, which of course is nonsense. That's simply not. So that argument that all these people are flush with cash and they're all spreading it around buying property is absolute nonsense. And of course, many of them are living, 20 or 30 to a 4 or 5 bedroom house, or even 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment. And so this idea of they're living one property apiece is bullshit. So that's an invalid argument. The other argument is that the government isn't arranging for enough new houses to be built. That's not true either. The rate of new house building is higher than it's ever been. So that's bullshit. Could there be more houses? Well, I suppose there always could be, but at the same time, the government is screaming about we need to green the planet and green the environment, while they bring in millions of people who are using far more energy than they ever did in the third world shitholes that they came from. So that's nonsense as well. So where's the economic growth, if anything, come from? Well, if you get a lot more people coming in and they're going to the the grocery store to buy food and those sorts of things, and they will be going out to rent, and buy houses, those are, but very few of them have the money to buy a house. So there'd be, not even 3% could afford to buy a house of the ones that are coming in. So clearly that's not where the demand is coming from. But they are buying grocery, probably buying a car and the like. So that is more consumption. So on the basis of, do these 100,000 people a month, or have many that get put, do they spend money? Well, sure, that money may be given to them through welfare. Not all of them are working or get work, but quite a small number of them do. Even after 20 years, less than half of them will ever have had a job. So this idea that they're all out there working and consuming, and that's bullshit as well. So the economic growth, I mean, the definition of what was economic growth used to be defined by productive output, but as the manufacturing base of the West has been whittled away and been replaced by services, and now rent on it, like if you go and say rent a house to live in, that's now redefined as a service. They've moved what were costs in a certain category or area or definition, it's been moved around, so that when you look at, and it's hard to believe anything the government says these days, because it's all now propaganda to be put out in aid of globalization and to maintain the narrative. So the idea of economic growth, its very structure and definition has been changed. So we could argue that because manufacturing's been sent off to places like China, then how do we therefore measure economic growth? It's by increasing the amount of money moving around. It's increases in price. For example, if the price of property goes up, the sale price, that becomes part of economic growth. So because now there's a supposedly greater amount of assets. Other claims that are just don't sit with me is that the amount of people who own or are paying a mortgage on their own house is exactly the same today as it was 50 years ago. I just don't believe that. The economics have changed vastly since that time, and the amount of people that can afford to buy a house now, just in Sydney, an average priced house, the amount of people that can afford to buy a house from their income has shrunk from nearly 70% down to less than 5%. So the idea that exactly the same amount of people are buying or bought their home, that's bullshit. Now, what I do accept is that offshore property buyers using stooge nominees own many hundreds of properties apiece. That I accept, but that's not owner buyers living in their property. That's not the same as it was 50 years ago. These are huge offshore investors engaging in all sorts of tax offset chicanery, and they're the ones that are owning these properties. It's not the average mum and dad and their 2.4 kids or something. Those players are just out of the game. So economic growth is artificial. It's just simply more people spending more money at the supermarket, and the increase in the price of houses, which then, now at the same time, the economists say, well, we don't measure increases in rent, as in renting an accommodation. We don't measure increases in rent. And then almost in the same breath, they say, well, we're very concerned about the inflation that's going on in the services sector. And if you read down into the small print, they say they're concerned about the increase in rents. If you read further on, they're talking about increase in rents for offices rather than residential. But you could also read it that they're supposedly saying, well, inflation is being fueled by rents. Now, the remedy to this is then, well, we'll just put up interest rates. That'll fix it. But pretty much anyone that owns a residential property, as an investor that owns a residential property that's out for rent, they're very highly highly geared to the max, because they're assuming property prices increases will go at a much faster rate than the payments they have to make. But once interest rates from their historically low levels start to move up, I remember paying interest rates of 12, 15% many years ago when I first bought a house. So these voodoo economics that they're putting around about that the nation is getting wealthier, and this is because of mass migration. I don't accept that. I don't think that stands up to scrutiny. The idea that, or the view that the per capita wealth is declining, and this is only due to some sort of vague miasma thing, I don't accept that either. There are direct causes to the decline in wealth of Western citizens, Australian citizens. In this case, I'm talking about, and it's all of it is engineered and orchestrated by the globalist cabal. And no Western government is sovereign anymore. They're all globalist stooges, and it's caused by that. So this new term per capita recession, well, it's not really a problem because the nation's getting wealthier. Everyone actually is better off. It's just not a problem. It's transitory. It's this. It's that. That's all bullshit. That's all nonsense, and none of it holds up to I think any reasonable or sensible scrutiny. So my view is that because of the artificial nature of our economy today, globalist, centrally controlled and orchestrated, that we're being forced, is being inflicted on us by central control, that we have to pay more for energy and food and housing and so on. But these people are relatively immune from it. They've got the cash to and the income and the cash flow to just bypass this. And again, talking to people who a very senior public servant that we had, there was like a lunch party thing we had lunch with a little while ago, and he and his wife who've never had to worry about paying a bill in their lives, by the way. They were talking about the increase in energy prices is good because it somehow is going to magically lead to a greener planet. They don't know how, and they don't understand why or the mechanics of it. They're just caught up in the ideology of it. And of course, the increase in energy, they pretty much run their air conditioning. They've got an extensive sort of ducted air conditioning system. They pretty much run that 24/7, and they've got a very expensive energy bill, but that they can afford. As a senior public servant, he's being paid $600,000-700,000 a year, and he's also inherited quite well, and so he doesn't have any problems with. So what if his electricity bill goes up from $1,000 a month to $1,500 a month or $2,000 a month? I mean, he doesn't care. It's not really an issue for him. This was a guy who's his dog got an infected paw or something like that, and given that there was the dog had some bone disease or something, I don't know the details, but he spent nearly $15,000 just on the dog's paw. And he mentioned this, well, it's a bit expensive, but he shrugged as he didn't care, and he went straight on to talk about something else. Now I don't know how many people in around can afford $15,000 to give medical care to their dog's paw. Wow. So that's his level of wealth, and he doesn't care about costs. But most people aren't in that category, and so if their electricity bill goes up from $500 to $1,000 or something like that hurts them. They're on a fixed income. It's not a high income, and they're struggling. I'll add another point to this. And I've mentioned this in other videos, in this per capita wealth decrease. I'm looking at this is a regional sort of large town, small city in Australia. Now they had all the time, they had 2,000, like anytime you go onto the job board in this district, they would have give or take about 2,000 jobs advertised on the job board. Now, a lot of those were part-time jobs, like working in low-paid retail store jobs, or working as labourers, or burger flippers, that sort of stuff, cleaning hotel rooms, whatever. And so that was their about 2000. At any time, you'd have about, this is pre-COVID, by the way. Even after, when things returned to somewhat normal after COVID, it came back to around that level. And I keep tabs on a couple of cities or towns in regional Australia to just watch what's happening there, just to get an idea of where the economy is going. Now, they're down from 2,000 to 1,100 jobs at the moment. So that's a 40% plus 45% reduction in the amount of jobs. Now the jobs that are lost, again, are mainly the low paid retail jobs. And my wife was in a shop just a few days ago, and I was going along on the weekend, and this was quite a busy women's clothing shop that always seemed to have people in it, and in the weekend at least, 3 if not 4 staff. And I noticed that not only was the shop not as busy, but there was only one person working there. So observing that, I sidled up and tried to engage in conversation, and the lady who was working there just said, well, things have gone really quiet. We don't need those people, so they've been laid off. And they were casuals, they weren't full-time people. But even so, so there's a vast amount of low-paid entry-level shit jobs. Now these may be younger people living with their folks and so on, but nonetheless, there's been a huge reduction in activity at that lower end, and that to me is illustrative of where things. Why, when there are those many jobs being lost in, and it's not out in the sticks, these things, it's 100 plus miles away from downtown Sydney type thing, or between 100 and 200 miles away. So it's not like it's in the middle of nowhere. Why is it that so many jobs are being lost? A 45% reduction in jobs in a place like that is a painful hit, albeit lower paid casual jobs, but nonetheless a painful hit. So why is mass migration being ramped up aggressively at the same time as jobs are being lost in the very area that supposedly mass migrants are being brought in to fill? So there's a lot of forces at play here which are only going to make things a lot worse, but there's no sign the globalists are going to let up. And that's deeply concerning. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.